In this video, we're going to go behind the scenes on the visual effects breakdown of Iron Man. This is part 3 of the 5-part series. We're covering the Mark II suit and escaping the cave. Throughout this video, we're going to dig deep into deconstructing the visual effects process for the film from the unique perspective of a visual effects supervisor. We'll discuss the work involved, the techniques, the technology, the process, all the key sequences of the film, and how all of them were created. I'm Allan McKay, I'm a visual effects supervisor in Hollywood. I've been working in the industry for 25 years at studios like Industrial Light and Magic and dozens of other leading visual effects studios. On projects like Game of Thrones, Transformers, Star Trek, Superman, Avengers Endgame, my goal is to teach artists and creators the skills and knowledge to build a successful career in the creative industry, as well as the business side of being an artist. This is part 1 of a 5-part video series. Each day this week I'll be reviewing a new sequence from the movie, as well as a compilation of the effects at the end of the week. The goal is simply to break down and explain the shots and the challenges for each of these sequences, and share my thoughts as a visual effects supervisor on how I would approach a lot of these. Typically we're handed the script, and we got to break down exactly what we need to do and allocate the right studios and the right people to each of these sequences. So this is an opportunity for me to be able to break down my thoughts on how I would approach a lot of these sequences and also discuss a lot of what's involved in the creative process. Finally, if there's a particular movie that you want to see covered in the upcoming visual effects breakdowns, let me know, leave a comment below, as well as any questions that maybe weren't covered here. I'm happy to answer those as well. So let's get started. Okay, so let's talk about this scene here. It's a rather big one. It's basically his whole escape with the Mark I suit that he built in a cave. I'm going to blast through this stuff pretty quick, because for me I'd rather focus on a few of the bigger sequences, but it is worthwhile talking about this stuff. So I'm just going to jump through a couple of scenes really quick. There's some stuff like this it's worthwhile mentioning. So I believe Embassy in Canada did all this stuff, but what's kind of interesting is it feels like it's all comp elements. Like, I don't really feel like there's any 3D in any of these shots compared to the Orphanage where like any element is pretty much going to be CG. Yeah, all of these are comp elements. So it's just easy to kind of pick this stuff up, but like, I mean, that's what you would do back in the day, and it's so funny how, especially Marvel films now, like everything is CG, including a lot of times it's just easier instead of where you're going to fly them out, put them up in a place, and put together a crew and do all these reshoots. It's just easy to say, well, we'll just animate that performance in 3D. So in a case like this, these are all comp elements kind of scaled up. There's some stuff like this. Again, usually you just don't do stuff in 3D this way too much, but it looks really good. Like I like the look of this stuff. This is very high contrast. Whether this is shot on set for that shot, I feel like this is comped in. The way that I would approach all this on set is to, yeah, have some kind of gag, just like a popper or something that shoots out of the gun, but because it is aiming at the camera, it could just be a stock element. I think some of these rock shots here, this is all 3D, and it kind of feels kind of obvious. One of the big trends I hated back then, it's always been a pet peeve of mine, and it's not to say it doesn't get done anymore, but these are just particle systems of rocks shooting out, but then what happens is they emit trails from this. So you end up with these like spaghetti fingers is what I've always called them, but you know, every studio would do it where you just emit smoke particles from all the stuff, and it just ends up being really murky, and I don't really like it. So there's that, but yeah, so there's just a quick explode, like 3D element here, and I feel like that's the only real one. Everything else here, I feel is just they've gone and shot a bunch of elements and comped them all in for these shots. So that's all stock or elements that they've gone and shot themselves. I'd imagine that fire in the background is comped in. Just by the way it's illuminating the rock and everything. I feel like it's just kind of like, you know, all you're doing is you're masking, you're feathering it all to it. So I think that stuff's comped in, just to kind of tie it into the rocket having hit. And then these are all just more elements of sparks that are, you know, and that's why like you're going to see this a lot in the sequence. There is so many spark elements, and they're just basically spark hits that you just buy libraries of this stuff. Even Pyromania in the 90s had lots of these elements, and they don't necessarily all go in the, you know, act how they should or anything, but it just populates everything. So it's just about getting these cards of sparks, like footage everywhere, just like there's footage there, another bigger card here, you got your flame card here, then you're going to mask the glow and everything around the rock to kind of make it feel like it's illuminating it, little things like that. And yeah, I'd imagine that there is 3D rocket, and then just lots of comp sparks on it again. Anyway, so more of that. I mean, this is typically how you do stuff kind of back then. Just, again, by 2008, I feel like a lot more people get more adventures going to 3D, but again, I feel like all this stuff is comp, and it just comes down to the studio. Some studios are essentially more comp houses, opposed to like having really big 3D departments. Now, a lot of this stuff here, just to kind of, I'm not going to go through the whole sequence, but I'll jump around a little bit. These are more of those spark hits. And that's what I mean, they're literally just footage kind of mapped on everywhere. But it works. I mean, the key to this whole sequence that Embassy did is it's frenetic. It's just about rotoing him, so you're just tracing around his body, and then so that way you can occlude stuff as it turns around. But then as it comes around, you'll see, you know, here's a good example of roto. So you would just have areas like this occluded, and then the sparks behind it, and the whole thing works. It's the same sort of deal, but it works. I mean, it does the job. All this works really well. I kind of always assumed that all of this was practical from day one, because it wasn't too common to see like lots of full-frame CG fire and stuff like that. Whereas it actually seemed like in some of these cases, and I was kind of impressed that they were going that ambitious, because I didn't really see too much CG fire. I've been doing a lot, but I kind of felt like I was the random one. But I mean, you can see here, you can see the steppiness because the motion blur and stuff doesn't really hold up too well. So I mean, this stuff is obviously all simulated, but at the time, that was kind of an, you know, it wasn't too common. So I was kind of impressed. The quality of fire they're putting out, all this is simulated. The one thing I am confused about, and I just never, you know, bothered asking the guys about this, but Embassy is meant to do all this, and they mentioned they were simulating, you know, all this fire and everything, but Scanline is also mentioned they were doing work on it. So I'm not sure whether Embassy outsourced all the simulation work or what. Yeah, I mean, Embassy's meant to have been doing it, but also Scanline seemed to do it. Scanline didn't, I believe, get any credits for this. I gotta double check that. But anyway, so I'm a bit confused as to who did what, but I would assume this is all Fume effects in 3ds Max as well. Assuming it's all actually done at Scanline. But again, like, this is all filmed. This stuff here is all simulated. Then we got stuff like this, which is all filmed. It's all practical. Because, I mean, this is just a gag. You got a stunt guy on fire, jumping into a bunch of crates. Everything's on fire. It looks really cool. There's stuff like this here, though, that you got the talent shooting fire, and also near the camera and everything else. So it's a lot easier just to go and do this all simulated. But it looks good. Like, I like what they've done. I think it's really ambitious for the time. And so again, that's just, essentially this is a second unit, whereas this is first unit. So this is where the other splinter group go off and film the stuff, get the stunt people together, and shoot a lot of chaos, you know, on a controlled set location. So stuff like this is kind of interesting, where this, I believe, is all footage, or maybe it's on fire, but this is a stock element here, so that's why it kind of like travels very quickly, hits the camera, but then the scale's kind of off and things like that, because problem is you're capturing a lot of footage that you're using a lot of different footage, a lot of different elements that aren't always going to fit the scale that you want. Because I feel like stuff like this, by the time it hits here, there should be a lot of smoke, and it should kind of be starting to transition more into smoke and fire, and that's where the contrast really kind of gives it detail. It looks really cool. Anyway, so I won't spend too much time on this. Obviously, a lot of this is all simulated. It looks really cool though. So again, these pieces here are simulated, just the fire elements coming out from his suit. And then, yeah, a lot of smoke just kind of added in to the shots. You can kind of see that. Anyway, so same stuff, just lots of sparks, lots of fire, both a lot of footage as well as simulated fire. So my hunch is that there were a lot of augmented fire simulations that Scanline did, and should really ask the guys. I'd be kind of curious. Oops. Some really beautiful shots, and then, yeah, some practical explosions and stuff like that as well. So I think this is all shot in camera. Cool. So this, again, here, all practical. Let's just get a demolition guy in. Coincidentally, I just got contacted to, I got asked to whether I'd be interested in a job as a demolition person in real life, not do a film, which I think somebody read my resume wrong, because I'm happy to blow stuff up on a computer, I'm happy to work on set, but me actually destroying a building in real life, I don't think that would go too well. So the only 3D element here is that you have Iron Man shooting up out of there. Everything else is all, I believe, shot. And then another smoke element. I think this is all, whether it's afterburn or whatever, I'd say this is all afterburn, especially if Scanline did it back then. Afterburn or pyrocluster back then. I have a feeling these clouds are 3D, so I'd assume that this is probably entirely CG shot. If you're doing something like that, you got some debris in the background, but yeah, I'd say it's entirely CG, 3D clouds. I'd assume that's a matte painting that you're just coming in on. Kind of a throwaway shot. I just would assume that that's the case. And I'd say this is a matte painting where this is all in frame, and then behind there is all kind of bashed together. And then this is all practical with CG dust or smoke or whatever, because this is kind of funny, but you can see it just disappears in 5 frames. So obviously you want to clear it so that way your focus is mainly on the talent. And I figured I'd mention this really quick. This isn't CG, but just figured I'd talk about it. All you're going to have is RDJ's head, and then he's going to be, you know, standing down here, and then you have an artificial body here that has a hole in it that you can put your hand in. And then whether it's his hand or it's someone else's hand, probably someone else's hand holding it there, and that way it just, you know, it sells the gag. I don't think there's anything too interesting about it, but I mean, it works. And then just talk about stuff like this, because I mentioned this earlier, like if you had a keyboard like this, but you didn't know what you're pressing, you're just going to be like tapping away. I always think of Kramer when he was like, he moved to LA in Seinfeld to become an actor. But, you know, he's working on Murphy Brown, the TV show, he's typing away and he's just frenetically punching keyboards. I used to have that exact watch, the Bulgari. It got stolen. I had like a huge watch collection, which I'll never see again. But anyway, so for something like this, having someone design this before you start filming means that you can map it all out and say, okay, you got to tap this key and whatever else. And that way they're actually interacting. They're hitting save, new, open. Okay, he's just pressing buttons, but at least he knows what buttons to press rather than there being nothing at all. So that sort of stuff is important. I feel like this movie kind of paved the way for a lot of movies kind of doing things right after this. And Minority Report, I feel like, played an even bigger role in that. But because of all this, now like every movie does this stuff. And then there's another good old Star Wars wipe right there. So I'm just going to jump through a few more of these really quickly, and then we can get into the good stuff. There's a lot of Tony Stark's home. I believe ILM did all these, and I think, again, this was all 3ds Max rendered in Brazil. Actually, I'm going for drinks tomorrow. Shout out to Nick, with one of the guys who was working on this stuff. But this is all the Digimat department at ILM. And this is actually Point Doom in Malibu. So, you know, it's kind of interesting. Like, I think in Iron Man 3, they shoot a bunch of interiors and things like that, which is all at a house in San Diego. But this, at least the location, is accurate. That's one thing I liked about Favreau, is that it isn't geologically jumping around a lot. It's actually like where it's meant to be is actually where it's shot. At least for all the LA locations. For everything else, it's LA. Just it says it's Afghanistan and other locations. But I used to come up here a lot actually to go and film around these locations, like specifically on this area. So it's very recognizable to me. But all you're doing is you're tracking the shot. You're doing a 3D model of the house. And yeah, just kind of building it out. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll be back tomorrow with the next part in the series. Each week I plan to review a different film and share as many insights as I can with you. And if there's a particular movie that you want to see, leave a comment below and let me know. Or if there's any big questions not answered here that you would like to see covered, let me know as well. I'd love to hear from you. Finally, all the content that I have on this channel I make for free, and all I ask in return is if you could please subscribe and like this video. It won't mean much to you, but it will mean the world to me, and you won't miss out on any of the upcoming content that I'll be releasing daily. One last thing, I recently released a free course on how to raise your prices and land clients as an artist. I've been in the industry for over 25 years, both as an artist as well as a manager, hiring artists, managing them, and paying them as well. So I'm very familiar with this topic. For me, it's a pet peeve when people say there's no money in art, art's not a career, art doesn't pay. I want to eliminate the starving artist mindset for good. That's why I've created this 8-hour free course on everything I know about how to price yourself as an artist and how to raise your prices and land your dream clients that are willing to pay you what you're worth. It's completely free right now, so get the entire 8-hour free course at pricingclass.com or click the link in the description below and you can check it out there as well. And if you like this video, check out the video somewhere above me on all the other visual effects breakdowns like this one of your favorite visual effects movies that I've reviewed so far. I'm Allan McKay, thanks for watching.